It's so good to be back with you all. Welcome back to Bible study.
Right.
This has been quite the hiatus. I hope you all didn't. I mean, I heard good things about the book that you all read, but I hope that maybe the break has given you a time to just think about everything we've talked about.
Mhm.
We are jumping into the book of John, which is going to be a very different change of pace from the history of Israel, which I personally needed. But you all chose an interesting and complicated book. So my plan for today was to start with the background of John, and then once we kind of understand where this book is coming from, jump into the first kind of monologue that we get in the book, which a lot of people find to be word salad, and try to make sense of the word salad that begins the book of John. Sound like a plan?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's jump in. Um, why I put up the book, the Gospel of John, is because John is unique among the four Gospels. You have the Synoptic Gospels, which they all kind of agree on what happened in what timeline. Generally speaking, they have the same kind of order of events, sometimes the identical wording from one gospel to the next. Mark is generally considered to be the first gospel written. It is the shortest, it is the briefest, and majority of Mark makes it into Matthew and Luke. So Matthew and Luke, there's a debate of which one of those two was written first. We don't fully know, and if you remember way back when we studied Matthew, there's a there's basically a source called Q that we think went that both Matthew and Luke had because they have the same parables, the same diatribes, they sound different, but there's this whole bulk of sayings of Jesus that make it their way into those two, but we don't have the original source yet. So we think there's this missing source. And then of course there's things that are unique to Matthew and things that are unique to Luke. John pushes all of that aside. There is a lot of debate right now. Originally, a lot of the scholarship from yesteryear said that John was written completely on its own without knowledge or understanding of the synoptics. More recent scholarship says no, John probably had a copy of Mark. He just chose to ignore it. There does seem to be some things where John aligns with the synoptics, but they are few and far between. It's actually a big deal when things from the synoptic gospels are also in John, because those are some of the big events, but there's big events from the synoptic gospels that never make their way into John. But some of our favorite stories of Jesus are only found in John. John's way of storytelling is also very different. Where the synoptic gospels tend to be fast, like Jesus is here, immediately he goes there. We have short stories, we have sayings, we have it's just very fast paced, like they're trying to get as much of his life in as possible, and they're running out of paper, so you got to make it brief and short, and so he zips all over the place. John is a slower pace. You have longer stories that take their time getting into it. They are more it is less about like sayings of Jesus that you memorize and stories that get to a point that's a little bit opaque. There's a lot of symbolism. John loves irony and paradox and theological diatribes that are Jesus trying to get across Jesus's nature. This is probably the most spiritual and theological book. So a lot of the church's theology comes from John because of those longer monologues of because of those that the longer time spent in each story, you have more discussion about the nature of Jesus, the nature of God, the nature of the world. Um, so John is also this is not really debated upon. Everyone agrees John was written the last of the four gospels that we have. It is the latest or the latest of the ones written. And how do we know this? couple of things. Number one, the theology is so much more mature. This is a group that has thought a lot about this and finally writing it down. Where like Mark is very much still processing Jesus's life and death to the point of Jesus's death was not originally written in Mark. That was tacked on late, or the resurrection was tacked on later. John has had a lot of time to think and mull it over. Also, the relationship between you will routinely now hear me talk about the Jesus fan club, and this is very important in this gospel because this is when the Jesus fan club is getting ousted from synagogues. This is when the relationship between the people who would remain Jewish and the people who would become Christian, it is disintegrating. And this is one of the most important things to remember about the book of John, because John is also the source of much of the Christian anti-Semitism that we have perpetrated through the years. The likelihood is that a lot of this dynamics of Jesus is really of having enemies in the Jewish communities, of fighting with the synagogues and the synagogue leaders. This is likely not reflective of Jesus's life, but the experiences of the community when they're trying to figure out, is the Jesus fan club Jewish or are they something else? And this is why it's very, if you remember all of our discussion about basically the trauma of the exile and why that was so impactful in Jesus's time of people like not wanting Rome to do what Babylon did. That is the like friction that this community is feeling. And um so when possible, I actually have a very deliberate word choice. Depending on the scripture you're reading, it's likely they are likely not going to do the same thing. When I talk about the people in Jesus's time in the book of John, I will use the term Judean because it denotes a religion, a time, and a place. A lot of scriptures will use the term the Jews. And I think that just connects too immediately to the Jewish community today, which is not the same as the ancient Jewish community. And I'm very against holding the Jewish community today responsible for whatever dynamics were going on in the past. So I personally choose to use the term Judean to kind of get a little bit of a break between those dynamics. Gretchen, did I see a hand or
I was just wondering how much the fall of Jerusalem uh, uh, applies or works
Mhm.
its way into this. I mean, by this time the temple was destroyed. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, so the time frame is around 90 to 100 CE. So not only with especially I think Luke, but definitely Matthew, seems to be some knowledge of the destruction of the temple, but it seems to be much closer in time. Here, so the temple was destroyed in the year 70. So even at the earliest, you have 20 years. So there are people who have now grown up who have never seen or experienced the temple. The interesting thing is the guess, we don't know this, the guess is that this book was written in Ephesus. So this does not seem to be a book that
Mm.
was written in Jerusalem or even in like Galilee. There seems to be like they have knowledge of these things, but they don't seem to have firsthand knowledge of the geography and of the placements. So there's a little bit where the geography kind of gets a little squiggly, and we're just gonna ignore that because these people the community that this came out of probably didn't know. But it is because of the destruction of the temple and kind of the trauma of that that the Jewish and Christian community is grinding against each other. So it is because of the destruction that there is this tension and that Christians are being ousted from synagogues. That is a protective measure of Rome just kicked our butts. You need to leave or they're going to kick our butts again.
so if it was written in Ephesus, it was a diaspora.
Yes.
Hmm.
So then that actually brings us around to the question of who wrote this gospel. Mark seems to have a single perspective. Luke very much has a perspective, but he copied someone else's homework. Matthew is a kind of similar. Matthew may have been more of a group project. John, because it has a very particular point of view, has often been attributed to one person. Historically, John. It is unlikely to have been written by the disciple John. What scholarship has said after that is like, well, John didn't write it, but his community, there's a Joanne community around him. And he had a different tradition because he was not in Jerusalem. He went out to spread the gospel, which is how he ended up in Ephesus, where the synoptics feel more grounded in the Jerusalem council that develops around Peter. This is a tradition that is apart from Peter's tradition. This is away from the influence of other disciples, which is why it's so different. So is it John? Maybe. The other attribution of it is there's a character in this gospel called the beloved disciple. And that is the one that a lot of scholarship seems to think that this book is centered on, is that the beloved disciple, who for some reason remains anonymous, had a very distinct community. And when the beloved disciple dies, the community writes down his version of the gospel, which is different than the Peter and the Jerusalem and the synoptic versions.
Yeah, right.
The things that are very different are like the theology is different, the focus is different, like I said, the pace is different, but distinctly the timeline is different. Whereas the synoptic gospels are mainly in Galilee, and then there's a certain point we will use the term Jesus turned towards Jerusalem and basically started making a road trip south and ends up in Jerusalem, where you have the triumphant entry, a bunch of things happen in Jerusalem, and then he is crucified and resurrected. Jesus ends up in Jerusalem 4 different times in John. He kind of bounces back and forth between Galilee and Jerusalem, back and forth and back and forth. So the timeline is different. Major events happen at different times. We will see that this book does not care about the timeline of the other gospels, which is one of the things where if you try to make it all make sense, it doesn't. People have tried really hard to make John interlace into the synoptic gospels. It doesn't care. So it is said that this is less historical and more spiritual. And I think there's a minority of people that says, no, John's the actual timeline and the synoptics cut some things out. I think it's more likely the other way, where John he has a story to tell and he's going to use the events to tell his story. I was reading up on a few more modern scholarship theories, and there does seem to be people who say the beloved disciple actually is nobody. It's not the author, it is not the community. It's an audience surrogate. So it's a nameless disciple that the readers or the listeners of the story can attach themselves into to kind of give themselves a character to be in the story. The other thought is that this is the ideal disciple and it's just a nameless person that was invented for the story. So some people think he's just a literary character. Some people think that this is the disciple that the community was around. But it does seem to be like a community existed around this particular gospel, in part because there is other Johns in the Bible. The plan is after we do this gospel, we are going to do 4 letters. So Paul wasn't the only one writing letters. We have John 1, John 2, John 3, and John 4. And these letters use the same theology and writing style as this gospel. Are they written by the same person? Unlikely. And the biggest controversy is whether the book of Revelation is written by this John. In my humble opinion, very, very unlikely that Revelation was written by the gospel writer. But I wouldn't doubt if John of Patmos, who we do know is the author of Revelation, was part of the Joanne community, because once again, you can see the theology kind of branch from one to the other. So Revelation is also kind of packaged in with the Gospel of John and the four letters. So lastly, some themes that I want us to like keep our ears open for as we're walking through this is there's a lot of discussion of the divinity of Jesus. Like, what is going on with Jesus's nature? Is he a really cool guy? Is he more than that? We're going to get that introduction today that has something to say about Jesus's nature, but it's going to come up a lot. There is a lot of themes of light versus darkness. And this, uh, I've talked about it before, of the influence of a religion called Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism was obsessed with light versus dark and a big cosmic battle. And this is the way we get it influencing the Christian community is John takes that Zoroastrian theology and applies it to Jesus. So in this gospel, you will, especially in our verses today, we're going to see light versus dark and and almost this cosmic light and dark, good versus evil kind of battling in the background. And it's a much bigger feature in this gospel. While this gospel is much more esoteric, where on Sunday mornings we've been hearing parables where Jesus is not fully explaining himself, but we can it's more grounded in things that people would understand. This book is much more esoteric. It nears Gnosticism, but it's not quite a Gnostic gospel. It's still very much like Jesus is human, where the Gnostics are much more like, oh, Jesus is otherworldly. This is as close to Gnosticism as we get within the canon. And then lastly, the conflict of between the Jesus fan club and the synagogues. That is a big feature, which leads some people to say that this book was not written for outsiders. This wasn't written to convert people to Christianity. This was meant to encourage people who were already Christian because they're facing times of trials. It's like remember and believe, remember and believe. We're gonna make it through it. We're gonna come out the other side. It's more of an encouraging stick to it and there's a good outcome rather than, hey, there's this guy named Jesus, you should believe in him. It's more written for insiders. So that is the quick and dirty background. Any questions, thoughts, reflections?
So that last point you made is very interesting, that it's really for believers, because the Gospel of John today is used as a not for non-believers in order to convince them that if they don't, they're in deep trouble. If they don't believe in Jesus, they're in deep trouble. So, well, it's very interesting.
I think if I was to take a guess, I would say it's because John is so theological that when people are trying to convert people to Christianity, it's not, hey, are you hungry? Come and eat, and we have good news of the liberation of the people. John is more like, believe this and you'll go to the good place when you die.
Yeah.
And with a lot of people who are trying to convert people, the emphasis is more on the believe this and you won't burn in hell. And John kind of lends itself to more of that style of thinking. It is less concerned with like feeding people and liberating people from oppressors. Like that kind of social justice side of Jesus is less prominent, which you get that definitely in Luke, you get it in Matthew. John is like, okay, Jesus, cool guy, let me explain why he's cool, which I think lends itself to that more conversion evangelical bend. Yeah, Sue?
Uh, I'm curious about how um,
John's the words in the Gospel of John are used in the creeds. It's almost word for word. And
Mhm.
how did that happen? Was it?
So the earliest creed is the Apostles' Creed.
Yeah, yeah, that.
We don't know who wrote it. That's one of the big
Oh, okay,
questions. It
okay.
kind of just appears suddenly. The Nicene Creed, we know the Council of Nicaea wrote that. So we
Well,
know where that creed came from. The Apostles' Creed comes out fully formed. I wish I had more of an answer, and it's probably because John states openly what the synoptic gospels refer to.
okay, so he says, and the Word became flesh and lived among us. I think they said the creed says probably dwelt among us, but the of course that's yeah okay. And the other thing is using Word to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using the new Bible. This is one
Okay.
we use, and it has all the stuff in the beginning. Word means wisdom.
We'll get to that in just a moment.
Oh, okay.
One of my favorite things to do with this first section is to diagram it, to pay attention to how words are used, the repetitiveness. Which is why I have it drawn up on the whiteboard in a moment. We're gonna highlight it and draw it out and pay attention to what the words
Oh,
say.
okay. Okay.
I just want to make sure we understand the background of like why John is weird.
Very. Mhm.
Actually, hold on. Let me grab something real quick. So one book that is interesting, especially when it comes to the Gospel of John, is the synopsis of the four Gospels. I mean, it's a seminary tool, so if you don't have to buy it, it's not a commentary. It's literally what they did is they put the four Gospels next to each other, and it shows when they align. So why can be helpful when it comes to the Gospel of John is to see if John cares about what's happening in the other stories or not. There's long pages where it's just John, and there's long pages where there's no John. And then occasionally there's times where an event is in all three of them. And it is really interesting to see how John's version is different even when the episode is in all three of them. Um, so as much as I can, I will bring up some of the difference. I will try to keep track of when John is on track with the other gospels and kind of bring out how things are similar and different, just because it's really interesting the way John uses some of the other stories. So if you want, there is that book. Like I said, no need to purchase it if you don't want to. It's just interesting.
Is yours in Greek too?
No, I mean, it has Greek notes at the bottom. I was far
Okay.
better at Hebrew than I was Greek, so
Yeah.
I have less Greek skills.
It's a, I think it's Allender. I say it's a Greek synopsis.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Hey, if you want, Gretchen, if you want to bring out the Greek, go for it.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that all the time. I'm so ensconced in it. Yes, right.
Mhm.
No, don't worry. I'm not going to bother you.
I don't mind. I know Greek is weak. The thing is, Greek and Hebrew, for everyone who doesn't know these two languages, they are polar opposites on like the way of thinking. Hebrew is very messy. It's very like, how do you know what's going on? Context. It's chaotic. Where Greek is almost formulaic. They're like, I always thought of it like a math problem. And so people tend to like one or the other. I don't know many people who like both languages, and because those people become professors. Alrighty. With that, let's jump into the scripture that we have, let me see if I can pull this. Did I? Yes. Okay. The work I did worked. Oh,
Hey.
hey. All right. Can you all see the words of John?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, actually, I take it back. I don't like, because I don't have a highlighter. Okay, never mind. I am going to pull up an actual Word document so we can do the same thing. So as I kind of futz with this just a moment, what I am going to invite us to do is when I get the Word document pulled up, I'm going to paste the words from our section today. Feel free to use your own Bible. I don't mind that. But what I'm going to do is pick out a word that is repetitive, and then we're going to highlight all the places that it occurs. And we're kind of going to try to diagram and map this a little bit to see, kind of make our way through this gobbledygook here. Well, oh, or does this have a highlight? Format, styles, text, color. Oh, that's sad. I thought that was going to have a highlighter. Okay. Whoops. So as I'm getting this set up, what is... Oh, goodness. I'm gonna stop that. All right. Gonna close that out. All right. Sorry about this, folks. But what is in this word salad that we have? What is a word that comes up a lot?
The word light.
Light? Alrighty. That is probably the most the most prominent word. Here we go. All right, we're just work here. All right. So we have our highlighter out. So, let's see. Where is light? That life was light.
There.
Yeah.
Light shining. Testify to the light.
All right.
He himself was not the light, but came to testify to the light. And true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, yet the world did not know him. Du, 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 du. Okay, so we have a lot of light. We're gonna switch colors. What's another word that is repeated a lot?
Word.
Yes, the word. So this is one that Sue Fish already alluded to. So the word in Greek, this is one Greek word I do know, is logos. Notably, so Greek is one of the languages that has gender attached to every word. And word is a male word. Let's see. And I can hold on.
14.
There we go. The
Yeah.
word became flesh. Okay. So logos is male. There is a theory, because there is a creation story found in Proverbs. I believe we went over this when we hit Proverbs. Excuse me, where wisdom is standing on the street corner saying, like, I was there at the beginning, like everything, I influenced creation, and like wisdom has all of these things, and basically taking credit for God's creation. And so one theory of what John is doing here, because wisdom is gendered feminine, that the feminine Sophia, which is wisdom, is changed to word. logos, which is male, but is kind of having an equivalent role because Jesus can't be Sophia because Sophia's of gendered female, so they chose another word, which is logos, which is word, which refers to the words of wisdom. All right. What else is going on? What other prominent features are we seeing here?
I see that world.
Yes. So was God like let's see, where help me. Oh, he was in the
He
world.
was in the world, and the world, yet the world
Did not know him. Lived among us.
Okay, that's it.
Yep, there we go. All right, next word.
God.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sent from God.
Image
I forgot.
yeah. Wait.
God.
No one has ever seen God. Okay. Any other features that we kind of want to highlight to kind of see patterns and rhythms? There's one that I'm going to help us out with. I'm going to highlight him because whatever the word is, it is basically using pronouns the whole time.
Yeah.
It's going to be life or him. And sent from John.
Might believe through him.
Where give me a verse number.
7.
7. Yeah.
He was a witness.
There we go. Believe through him. There we go.
And himself.
Hold on. I'm holding off on that one because we have yet to mention John. Because we have John the Baptist thrown in here. And
Yeah.
he was in the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know. Whoop. Whoop.
Did not accept him.
Mm-hmm.
Him.
And well, we'll highlight his name.
And at the very end, Father's heart, who has made him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got tripped up a little bit around John. So let's highlight there's a man who was named John.
Okay.
He came to witness and testified to the light so that all might believe through. And this is one where English is tricky, but Greek is clear. That him is the word him, or is the light in the word him. He himself was not the light, but
okay.
This is one where I know this passage. I've done this enough times that I know.
Yeah.
This is why we diagram and highlight. It helps. Okay. Wait, oh, we have world here. Have we highlighted world yet?
No.
We highlighted
Oh, yes, we
world
did.
and
Yeah.
word.
Yeah. Blue, light
World.
blue.
There we go. Testify. Okay.
John testified to
Tied to
him,
him.
left out the him,
Ooh.
15.
testified to him.
Um, uh, let's see. He came to rescue.
Him is dark blue, isn't
Verse 15.
15. Oh, there we go. John came to testify. Let's see. John is red. John testified to
he? Him, which is
him
blue.
and cried out. Ooh, and then we're gonna highlight.
He,
Well, this is what John says. Let's highlight that. But we're going to re-highlight. This was he who because he was before me. Okay. Any other features we kind of want to point out before we walk our way through this? All right. I think that is some of the main themes that will help us, at least in color, we can start to make sense of this. Uh, let me Okay. We're gonna zoom in a little bit because we just need the words big. All right. So I can only kind of see you all. So if you have a question, like just start speaking because this view is kind of funny sometimes. Or hold, hold on, let me see. There we go. I can see you all better now. All right, can you all see everything okay?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so we have in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this is the first sentence that kind of starts us off to the races. What is being said here? So we have the three parts to the sentence that leads us immediately to a deep theological statement. What is the theological statement being made?
Well, this is in the beginning, God created.
So we have a callback to Genesis. Like this author very clearly knows Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. But this isn't God creating in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word.
Word, yeah.
So, I already mentioned that the Word is kind of an analogous idea to the idea of Sophia being there in the beginning, being the wisdom. This is the Word.
Word, yeah.
Why choose the Word as kind of a replacement for wisdom?
Does it refer to Jesus?
It is referring to Jesus, but why choose words? Like, in the beginning was the light of the world was an option. They chose to use Word.
Oh.
So think back to Genesis, to your way back to Genesis. You can flip it open and see the 6 days of creation. What happens So, I'm gonna help you out a bit. I'm gonna read just the first few verses of Genesis, and you tell me why word was chosen. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while the wind from God swept over the face of the water. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Well, God's using words.
Yes, God speaks creation into being.
Yeah.
So this is now saying, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Was God.
So we have kind of this tangle of ideas here. Anyone want to take a stab at what the author is trying to get at?
I always think of it, Jesus is God, is
Mhm.
my conclusion.
Right.
And Jesus was in the beginning with God. And while we read in the other Gospels the birth of Jesus, Jesus was before the birth. Jesus and God were right there, buddies.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So if you claim that Jesus is God, you have a few heresies that you're going to trip and fall into very quickly that John is very immediately trying to nip off at the bud.
Hmm.
Because in the Jewish faith, you have a monotheistic faith. Gone are the days where the Jewish community kind of flirts with polytheism. This is well-established monotheism, and the Lord your God is one. Is one. I am the Lord your God, the Lord your God is one. You have one God, and that is God, and that is the only God. So, how do you get around the fact that Jesus is God? Because that makes two. And so,
Oh,
what John is doing is saying, no, 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 this is not two, that this is one. This is one that's also two, but it's also one, but it's also two, but it's also one. And look here at the beginning of our scriptures that we use. See, in the beginning, God created and God used words. So those words are God, but it's also Jesus, but it's also God. See, they're the same thing in the beginning because Jesus is not a new thing.
Right.
Because if you let Jesus be a new thing, that looks like God created another God or a demigod, which this community would be very familiar with Greek mythology, and they very much want to say, yes, Jesus is divine, but Jesus is not like Hercules. Jesus is not like Hermes. Jesus is not like the Greek pantheon that gives birth to other gods. No, no, no. There is no new God. Jesus is not a separate deity. Jesus is the same deity as the deity that is one. So like God's one, but he's also two, but he's also one. And this is how we begin the word salad is kind of trying to jump through hoops and explain how a monotheistic tradition can have God incarnate. And their way to do this is to go back to the very beginning and say, no, 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 no. Look, Jesus being on earth is a new thing, but Jesus existed already. Jesus existed at the beginning of time because Jesus was the words that God was using.
yeah. Does that imply that Jesus was part of God?
And this is where to say anything more than that is to do another heresy. And this is something Christianity has debated from time umpteen, is that to say anything about the Trinity is to do heresy. And so, yes, it's like Jesus is a part of God. Jesus is also the same thing as God, but Jesus is also separate than God. there is heresy around. Modalism is the most common heresy that Christians will default into. It's like Jesus was a mode of God. So I bring that up to say most ways to explain this are partially correct and partially incorrect, and Christians have never fully figured out a good way to explain this. So yes, it kind of gets at the point to say yes, Jesus is the same as God, but also a part of God, but also they're the same thing.
And what happens to Mary and Joseph?
Not featured in this book. Mary and Joseph, no, we skip from creation to John the Baptist. There are no Christmas stories in this book. So they don't care about Jesus's parentage because Jesus is divine. So, like I said, this is much more theological, much more spiritual. Talk about how Jesus is born, they don't care. So the second verse, Gretchen?
But it is interesting in present day that we connect Mary and John through the legends of the Virgin Mary. This was her house, and I mean, she's not ever mentioned in John, but they put them together.
Yeah.
And it drives you crazy. But, you drink the water,
Yeah. So the second verse is, he, i.e. the Word, was in the beginning with God. Okay. So once again, the Word is God, but the Word's also with God. And that's when you kind of get this, the two are one, but also they are just one, but also they're kind of two. Bear with me here. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. And so this is once again getting back to the story in Genesis where God is literally speaking creation into being, and people are saying, yeah, that force of creation is Jesus. So see, Jesus is present in the beginning. We just didn't realize that Jesus is in Genesis. But hey, look, if you look back, Jesus is the mode of creation. So the force of creation is Jesus himself. And what came into being in him was life. This is one word that we didn't highlight. We probably should have. So, because what God is speaking into being is life, and life was the light of all people. And that light is, we see, the first thing that God creates. God speaks and says, let there be light, and there was light. And so that light is seen as the driving force of creation. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overtaken it. And this is where we begin to see the duality of light and dark make its way into Christian theology. Because in Genesis, there is no value statement given for when God separates the light from the darkness. God just calls it good. And the light is called day, and the darkness is called night. But here there seems to be a value judgment added into it. So God separates the light from the darkness, and only the light is good, and the light leads people, and the darkness is seen as not just the opposite balancing force where you need time of activity and time of rest. Darkness is depicted as almost consumptive, as something corrupting, of something that wants to consume the light. And so that is the new theology added back into Genesis, is it's not just that light was created, it's that God pulled light out of darkness, but darkness is trying to consume the light back. So I'm going to pause there. We don't have too much time on our hands left. But any thoughts about this kind of wham bam, thank you, ma'am, introduction to the gospel? Yeah, Larry.
So in the first paragraph there, you've got the word highlighted in green,
Yes.
but that may refer to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got he highlighted in blue, which
Yeah.
may also refer to Jesus, might it not?
Yes. This whole time, the Jesus's name notably does not appear in this section.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to pull out the word because the word is doing theological statements here. Like there is there is parallels being drawn in the same way that the light is also kind of a stand-in for Jesus's name. And
Okay,
so I
gotcha.
just wanted to
Yeah.
show you the difference when when
Mhm.
we talk about John, the pronouns get very confusing. And so
Yeah.
I just wanted to be able to separate out the pronouns that meant John and the pronouns that meant Jesus.
Okay, gotcha.
So yes, word, light, and he and him, all of those are being used to refer to Jesus.
Okay.
So our second paragraph. There is a man sent from God, notably not pre-existing, not part of God, a man sent, born normal man, and his name is John. And he came to witness and testify to the light. Witness and testifying is a major theme. We are getting all the themes of John are present here. So we have witness, we have testify, and we have the fact that John the Baptist, who this is, spoiler notes, John the Baptist is the one who came and told us about the light so that we might believe through him. The belief is like that's another core feature of this book. We're supposed to believe in Jesus, so it's believe through him. But the author wants to make clear that John is not the light because this seems to be a feature in all four gospels. People be like, hey, is Jesus the same as John? Is John the same as Jesus? Is John the Messiah? Is Jesus the Messiah? There seems to be a little bit of mix up because both of them were executed. And so you have an executed radical guy. Was it Jesus? Was it John? Were they related? Were they not? So John just came to talk about Jesus, to point to Jesus, to point to the light. John is not the light, but he testifies about the light. And the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. All right, let me scroll down a little bit. We're going to speed run this so we don't run out of time. Once again, we get a bit of word salad because John is trying to do theological things, saying that two different ideas are actually one and the same.
Okay.
He, the Word, the light, Jesus, was in the world, but also the world came into being through him because this is the creative force in nature, of creation. So creation was created through Jesus, but Jesus is now also in creation. But the world did not know him. And this is another key feature is that there seems to be a messianic secret that the people who were supposed to recognize Jesus as God, as the Messiah, as the light of the world, seem to not understand or know who Jesus is. So he came to the world that was created through him, but the world did not recognize him. He came to what was his own, i.e., the Jewish people, and his own people did not accept him. This is talking about the rejection of Jesus by the Judeans at the time. But to all who received him, who believed, because remember, we're supposed to believe Jesus. We believe in his name, and his name is a word. So we have, once again, a belief in the word. He gave powers to become children of God. This is hearkening back to Israel being seen as the chosen people of God. Those are the children of God. So it's not a birthright. Belief is now reclaiming the idea of becoming children of God. That's not something you're born into. That is something belief creates, which is different than the Jewish tradition. And we get the explanation in verse 13 that children of God are not born of blood or the will of flesh, as in your parents didn't decide to birth you, and you are not born of flesh and blood, because that is how the Jewish tradition is passed, or of the will of man. People did, or notably, the will of man and the will of flesh are separate because, once again, flesh, we have a differentiation between flesh, like the material world, and the spiritual world. We'll see that dichotomy come up. But people becoming children of God are the will of God. So, and so you have the last line, or the last section, the word became flesh. This immaterial thing that predates creation became a part of creation and was born in flesh and blood and lived among us. And we have seen, oh, his glory. I didn't highlight that. His glory and the glory of the Father's only Son. We also get the introduction of God the Father language here. And we are told that this word is full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, this is he whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me. This is kind of couching, like, see, John told us this complex theological thought was true because John testifies to the light, and the testimony that John gave said, okay, there's going to be someone who is born after me, but he's more important than me because he predates me. So once again, you have this timeline jumping back and forth. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. And then we have the introduction of like how this is going to counter Jewish theology. The law was indeed given through Moses. That part is true. Grace and truth come through Jesus Christ. So we have the law, which is over here, grace and truth, which is over here. So these are different things are happening. No one has ever seen God. It is only the Son, God himself. Once again, God and the Son are the same, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. So Jesus is both God and not God. No one has seen God, but we have seen Jesus. And if we believe Jesus, then we have interacted with God. Because Jesus made God known to us, because Jesus is God, and God was made flesh and dwelt among us. So, what do you all, if you would give me a few extra minutes above 11 o'clock, what do you all think of this just banger of an introduction to the life and ministry of Jesus?
Well, I like the Christmas story. That's easier.
John front loads all of the theology and says, okay, here's all of the theology. Now let me spend a bunch of chapters explaining why this is true. It's kind of like the story of Romeo and Juliet. Hear me out. Shakespeare at the beginning of Romeo and Juliet says, there's going to be two people, they're going to fall in love, and they're going to die, and it's going to be a tragedy. And then we have the rest of the play explaining how Romeo and Juliet fall in love and eventually die and why it's a tragedy. This is front loading all the theology, and then John's like, okay, let me explain what I mean. So if that was heavy, yes, we will likely return to this at the end of John, and it will make more sense. But we have, like I said, we have all the themes already present. We have both the divinity of Jesus front and center, because that's a big feature of this book. We have the rejection of Jesus by his peers. Big theme. We have light, we have darkness, we have confusion, irony, and paradox. This is, if you can see how when I said the theology is much more developed, they have been thinking a lot about this and how to make these things work within the Jewish mindset that says, okay, we are a monotheistic religion, but also Jesus is divine. How do we make this work? Wait, the Judean people didn't accept Jesus? Wouldn't the Judean people accept their own God if it was in flesh and blood? What is happening?
Mhm.
So it starts with a whirlwind.
Wow.
What?
And we're introduced to that grace. And
Mhm.
then grace is right there in the middle of it, and
Mhm.
we'll
We
follow that.
we have grace and truth juxtaposed with law. Notably, law and truth are not the same.
Mhm.
This would have been very hard for anybody who was not part of the Jesus fan club
Mhm.
to accept or even want to read. I mean,
Mhm.
And, and it's awfully difficult to contemplate uh, the dynamics. I mean, how did all of that work? You know, it's you can almost get the feeling, well, we sort of know what things are like. Now we're going to invent an explanation for it, you know.
Mhm.
Uh, which came first? Is it somebody describing something that there is evidence for and saw it happen, or is
Mhm.
this just scholarly explanation for things that have happened over the entire history of the world, you know? So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, this is much much more of people thinking complicated thoughts rather than describing what happens. The
Mhm.
synoptics are much more descriptive. This one's much more contemplative. It's
Yeah.
meant to be confusing. And
Yeah.
that's one of the features.
And it
It's
is.
meant to be this way.
Mm.
So, all right. Thank you all for bearing with me. Hopefully that is the
Oh, thank
hardest
you.
word salad we are going to make our way through. I will not promise. It is not the only time that John makes word salad of his thoughts. But that is definitely one of the more difficult ones to make our way through. But with that, shall we pray ourselves out for today?
Mhm.
All right, let us pray. Mm. Gracious and loving God, we often try to make sense of you and make sense of Jesus and make sense of the stories and try to understand the nature of things. Not just what happens in our life, but why. And why you are the way you are and how you are in our world. And God, it is a mystery. I personally think I thank you for the fact that you trust us with being intelligent and curious, that we may always dig deeper into the ways that you are, but give us guidance for when it is confusing. Help us to see the wisdom as we trudge through this theological book to understand both your nature and Jesus's nature and how all of this interplays together and why we should care in our life today and how it affects us. So be with this group as we embark on this study. Be with them through the week and until we're able to gather again together. In Jesus' name, amen.
amen.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Thank you
Thank you,
all so
Chris.
much. See you
Thanks,
next
Chris.
week.
Thank you, Chris.